Welcome to the first episode of the series that shows how easy it is to lie with data and how we can recognize such lies ourselves and be resistant to them. Let's begin. If you've ever opened the news, you've probably come across the classic example of two politicians in the middle of a debate, both claiming that the facts are on their side. To any viewer, this of course seems absurd, since they are clearly talking about the same objective data. This means it cannot be interpreted differently, and therefore one of the politicians must be lying. Let's say you decide to learn more about the data mentioned during the debate. One of the politicians seems more open, so you check the data from that side. After reading it all, it's clear to you that this politician was right, and obviously the other is lying. There's no need to look at the other side's data, because logically it should be the same. But this way of thinking leads to stubbornness and political radicalization. In reality, the data is indeed the same. The difference lies in how it's presented. Let's look at, for example, a chart showing how many tons of waste are released into nature by the company Evil Incorporated. The director of this company claims that pollution has been drastically reduced in recent years and shows us the following diagram. At first glance, everything seems fine here, but let's look at another way of presenting the same data with a bar chart. This might seem strange at first, but this trick is a common way companies and governments lie to the public. To understand what's happening here, let's write the data into a table. Now, let's again look at both charts, but this time side by side. Really try to think for yourself about what the difference could be. Just to remind you, both graphs are showing the same data. If you were looking very closely, you might have noticed the markers for the height in the graph are missing. This is where the difference is. As we can see, in the first chart, the column height is measured from 101 onward, while in the second, it's measured from 0 to the value for that year. With the same data, by choosing different starting points, we've managed to present it in two different ways. This really does happen in real life. But don't take my word for it. Let's look at an example. This graph was published in a report by the German Economic Development Agency, and it shows how workers in Germany work more hours per week than in most other EU countries. As you can see, this chart starts at 36 hours, which means the differences in the chart look much larger than they are in reality. But this is not the only way institutions and individuals lie using data. Suppose we have the following table showing changes in the job market. Like before, there are multiple ways to present it. Earlier, we saw how you can choose from what value a chart begins, but you can also choose which data you take. Let's say there's a politician that wants to be reelected, and he has the data on screen. He needs to make it seem as positive as possible. Of course, he needs to have the year on the chart, but what else? Try to think for yourself how this chart can be made deceiving. Well, he can take only the number of jobs created every year. Let's draw the graph he would get if he would draw the data we highlighted. For a supporter of this politician, it clearly looks like he deserves another term. In reality, however, the actual change in the job market is the net change, which is the number of jobs created minus the number of jobs lost. Let's draw the net change. In this case, the chart looks much different. As you can see, there has actually been less jobs every year because of the amount of jobs lost. With so many ways to manipulate data, it's easy to fall victim to carefully curated half-truths and biased narratives that are presented as common sense. Although the situation may seem daunting, we have more than enough tools to protect ourselves from being misled. One of the most powerful ways to stay informed is by learning to spot misleading information. By recognizing the common tricks and distortions a presenter might use, you can identify dishonest sources and instead turn to those that are neutral and objective. Remember, knowledge is your best defense against deception. With that out of the way, let's look at the third very popular method of misleading with data. Using percentages. Imagine you're the mayor of a city with two polluting companies. You have to choose one to shut down so residents can have cleaner air. The first company, Pollution Incorporated, shows you this table. You notice they are polluting, and each year more and more. When the director of Pollution Incorporated leaves, the owner of Evil Incorporated comes into your office. He shows you this table. There's less data on the chart, but when you compare the tables, you notice that Evil Incorporated's pollution in percentage terms has increased much less. Where's the catch? Try to think about it yourself before we give the answer. The problem is that we don't know the total amount of pollution. Percentages are useful only when we know the figure being changed. Without that, they're meaningless. If we complete the table with the data the owner of Evil Incorporated hid, we notice something interesting. While their pollution may have increased less in percentage terms, the actual jump is much bigger. Comparing the two tables makes it clear which company is the bigger problem. This kind of example is very common in the real world. Reports on the amount of recycled waste often feature companies that recycle almost nothing, but report a 100% increase in recycling. Thank you for watching the video. Join us next time and find out why the average of something does not mean as much as you may think.